So what we're doing today is getting together to discuss the Small Business Association's Paycheck Protection Program. Julie is the director of the Sustainable Opportunity Development Center, which is the economic arm of the city of Salem, and has direct interaction with so many businesses and independent contractors, and has already helped quite a few people with their applications and going through the process of getting this loan. So I really wanted to tug on her because so many of my friends are self-employed or are independent contractors. And Julie at the same time wanted to get this information out to people so that people had the information they needed to apply and what paperwork they needed to get together, etc. So Julie, thank you very much for taking the time to do this. I know, especially now, you're very busy. And I'm just going to turn it right over to Julie. She has a PowerPoint presentation that she's going to roll through. And then we'll do, if you have questions, go ahead and join in on those questions on Facebook Live. This will be recorded. So if you want to ask for a copy of the recording to share with your team, if you have a team, go ahead and let us know. But without further ado, Julie, go right ahead.
Thank you, William, and thank you for asking me to do this. Extremely important. I have, since this was announced that it was coming out, I have been very busy with phone calls. I will say I'm very happy to report that we do have a couple that have been approved and are ready for funding. One's funding today. So a lot of information out, some misinformation, some things have been changed from the initial rollout. So really wanted to share the information that we have, the information that we've gathered from very reliable sources, one being the SBA, the SBDC, a lot of our lenders that are working through these programs. So try to put it together as simple as possible for everyone to, a lot of the questions that I'm getting are from businesses who have never borrowed money before. So this is difficult for them to work through because it's not something that they normally do or have ever done, especially commercial lending and having to talk to a commercial lending officer. So, one thing, it is a federally funded backed loan, 100% by the SBA. I'm trying to move my screen here along. Let's see if it's going to move with me. The whole purpose of the loan is to keep people working, to keep businesses. I don't know why we're not moving here. Hang on a second. I'm sorry, technical difficulties.
Julie, talk a little bit about your background, because I know you have a background in banking, and I think that's valuable as a component of this. Now you're in economic development, but your background in banking also is helpful.
Yeah, it has been. I'm thankful that I've had 24 years of banking experience. So a lot of that on the residential mortgage side, but many years within the commercial business banking realm. So working with businesses on a regular basis, probably for the last 6 to 7 years of my banking life. And it's been very helpful because I had a lot of connections in banking. So being able to have those conversations with our local lenders who are going to be offering these programs, it was extremely helpful to get their viewpoint and how things were going to operate and things were going to work. And they've been extremely kind and very responsive. They want to help our local businesses. So they've been working around the clock, and I give them all kudos because this came out quickly. Banks had to react quickly and had to put a program together that didn't exist. So I really give them all a lot of credit, and I thank them for helping the businesses.
Good. Okay, looks like you got your slides ready. Let's roll.
Yep. All right. So purpose of this is really, like I said, is to keep small business open, keep employees employed. Part of this, it can be forgivable. There are no SBA fees. Many people, if you've talked about any SBA loans in the past, there are fees that go along with it. All of those fees, lenders' fees, are waived for this particular program. So, it's part of the CARES Act, which President Trump signed March 27th, and the small business and sole proprietors could apply as of April 3rd. Many banks were ready, some were not ready, some were still getting some changes from the SBA. Actually, there were changes that came out from the SBA April 2nd, probably about 9:30, 10 o'clock that night. So many banks scrambled to get this up and running, like I had mentioned. So I give them credit for doing it so quickly. And then this past Friday, independent contractors and self-employed could apply for this loan. There is $349 billion earmarked in the CARES Act for this particular loan. Who is eligible? It's for any small business with fewer than 500 employees, 50C3 nonprofits with less than 500 employees, any individual who operates a sole proprietorship, independent contractors, self-employed individuals who regularly carry on any trade or business, tribal business concerns, 501c19s, which are veteran organizations, and most recently added last week were faith-based organizations impacted by COVID-19. That was not originally spelled out. It has been clarified by press release from the director of the SBA.
Can you repeat that last portion again for me, please?
The faith-based organizations.
Who was added that's not on the list currently?
That is who. That is faith-based organizations were not originally on this list, and they are now. That came out, directive came out last week from the director of the SBA. There are some special rules that if you don't fall into those categories that could make you eligible, and that specifically for the accommodation and food service industry, the 500 employee rule is applied per physical location basis. So if you have multiple locations and you have 10,000 employees, if you have one location in Salem that has less than 500, that location could be eligible. Also franchisees or financial assistance approved small business investment companies, the normal affiliate, there's some affiliation rules that go along with it. This is where it gets a little tricky. So if you're over 500, my recommendation is definitely contact your CPA. CPAs have been very well versed. Many of our CPAs in Salem, I have had conversations with. They are a great go-to. If you're considering this loan and you work with a CPA, call them. Best thing that you can do to prepare yourself for possibly applying for this loan. And then the 500 employee threshold is inclusive of all employees. So full-time, part-time, any other status. So if you have seasonal included in that part-time or full-time, those have to be included in that total count. And I'll get to this at the end, but there is you can do a check through the SBA on small business size. There are very specific sectors of business that if you are over 500, you could still qualify for this loan. So the funds can be used for mainly the funds. The purpose of this is to pay payroll. It is an 8-week period from the origination date that they want you to be paying payroll. And that payroll is to retain your employees, to retain your existing payroll, to bring people back that maybe have been laid off, to continue any group health care, your salaries, commissions, any similar compensations, interest payments on any mortgages, your rent, utilities. Your utility payments can be, your general utilities, your electric, your water, your sewer, your gas, includes telephone, internet, and transportation. So all of those can be included into your utilities paid. And then also interest on any other debt obligation that you incurred prior to the covered period, which is the time from origination of this particular loan. Here's the tricky part that many have been back and forth on how to calculate, and that is how you calculate how much you can get for this loan. To keep it very simple, it's 2.5 times your payroll. There are some things that can be added into that, and how you calculate that payroll can be done a couple of different ways. You can use a 12-month period of 2019, January 1st to December 31st of 2019. You can use, a rolling period from, let's say, February 15th of 2019 to February 15th of 2020. If you weren't in business in 2019, you would use from the date up to that you apply for the loan. So most are going up to March 31st for the 2020 period. Seasonal has a little bit different. So again, I would recommend talking to your CPA on getting those calculations for your payroll.
Julie, quick question on that.
Sure.
I'm assuming that this is taxable wages after all write-offs. That is the eligible income amount?
The income is gross income. So yes, it's your gross income.
Got it. So if you have a 1099 that was provided to you by an employer, it's actually the amount on the 1099, not the net after all of your deductions?
That is correct. Now, that is, those rules, that's what we're hearing. Again, I would check with your accountant. I did check again last night on SBA's site just to see if anything had changed with the rulings for independent contractors and self-employed, and there really isn't any different language. There aren't any different guidelines. There hasn't even been a separate application published for them, which they originally talked about doing. So going by the basis of what they have for the original group of applicants, gross income is what they're using. Now, I have seen some for self-employed, which, 1099, that is definitely, it's a good question. The self-employed, when you're going through some examples of calculating, they're having you use the net income. So, a little bit different from a 1099, but definitely, again, I'm not the expert on this. Just sharing some information that we've gathered from our trusted resources. And on 1099, I would recommend you talking to your CPA on that one. And your banks are going to give you some good guidance on that as well. The two people that you need to call if you're considering this loan are your financial institution that you regularly bank with, and also your accountant. So back to the payroll costs, that compensation does include any vacation, family leave, medical leave, anything that you've paid in that 12-month period to an employee, of the allowance for dismissal or separation, payment of your group care, health care benefits, any insurance premiums, any retirement benefits that the company is paying for the employee. So if you're contributing to your employees' 401k, that can be included in that total payroll cost. And then payment of state and local tax assessed on the employee's compensation. There was some originally some discussion regarding the FICA and taking out the FICA, and that is no longer. You can't add in what the employer is paying in federal taxes, wage taxes, but you don't have to any longer take out what the employee is paying, which was the original conversation. So not to muck it up any, but It was a little bit difficult. I've had a few that I had to go back and forth a couple of times, but we've had some great CPA and payroll companies in Salem, and they've been very helpful in pulling this payroll data. And what I can suggest is keep it simple. Go with the gross income. If you pay health insurance, include your health insurance benefits and premiums. If you pay retirement, include your employer portion, and then your state and local tax.
So Julie, quick summary here, 2.5 times eligible payroll. What constitutes eligible payroll is part of the discussion that they need to have with their accountant as well as their bank. The people that you've gotten personally walked through the process and seen them get the funding, were those people who were, what was the nature of their income? And can you speak to that a little bit very quickly?
Yeah, the ones that I have had so far apply are all, they were in the first round. I have not had any 1099 or self-employed individuals apply.
Got it.
As of today.
Okay.
I have not talked to any banks one-on-one regarding that process because those just went live on Friday.
Got it. Okay.
I put out some questions, but I don't have any information yet. So as we get more information on those, and I will definitely share those on our site and through our email and with the DSP. So there are some things that you do have to exclude in your payroll calculations. So you cannot include any employee or owner compensation over 100,000. So if you have an employee, let's say that makes $120,000, you include up to $100,000 of that employee's payroll. You're leaving off the 20,000. There was some confusion in there originally that, you know, you had to leave that person out completely because they made more than 100,000. That is not accurate. You include up to the 100,000. You also, if their benefits that you're paying take them over that 100,000 threshold, you still include those. So their health benefits would be included if it pushed them over 100,000. Now you cannot, I know earlier it said you can include, you know, family leave wages. What you cannot include in those are the family leave wages that were enforced through the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So those are reimbursable to the employer, which is why those are not included in your total payroll cost here. And then any compensation for an employee whose principal resident is not within the United States. All loans will have the same terms on this program. Your interest rate is 1%. It has a maturity of 2 years. Your first payment will be deferred for 6 months and 100% guaranteed by the SBA. There's no collateral, no personal guarantees, and again, no lender fees, no SBA fees for the program. And the loan period, what they're saying here is from February 15th to June 30th of 2020. You have until June 30th to apply for this particular loan. However, based on numbers coming from the SBA on Monday, they have approved 880,000 applications at this point for a total of 217 billion, which is 62% of the 349 billion that was made available.
So they need to move very quickly.
You need to move fast.
Yeah.
And by all reports that I'm reading this morning and even last evening, it was highly suggested that if you're considering this, you need to do it now. Even if you have reached out to your bank and you haven't heard anything back, you need to give a little push. I know the banks are overwhelmed, but there is no guarantee that additional funds are going to be added to this program. I know we've heard some conversations about that, but there is no guarantee. And if there is additional funds added, there's no guarantee that it's going to work exactly the same way as this program is working now.
From what I've heard within the mortgage circuit specifically, they are talking about CARES 2.0 and that it will address some gaps that this CARES Act specifically did not address. But like you said, they're not sure if CARES 2.0, which they believe is going to happen, is going to provide additional funding to these kinds of resources, which are already out there. The hope is if they have enough applications and there's a shortage of funds that they would fill that gap, but we don't know that yet. But there is already discussion of CARES 2.0.
Correct. That is correct. And you've taken into consideration $349 billion were made available. The max loan size on this was $2 million. However, there are 39 million small businesses in the United States. That leaves very little if every business would apply. All right, so what documentation are you going to need to apply? This again has changed because this particular SBA loan, you have to go through your financial institution to get. Every financial institution may require some different documentation. One thing you definitely have to do is prove your payroll. That's what this loan is based on. That is what your loan size is based on, is your payroll. Lenders are going to verify that payroll. However, they're not required. They have to have the documentation. It is up to you as the business owner to calculate your payroll, which is why I recommend you talking to, if you have a payroll company or your CPA, about your total payroll costs. Many of our local CPAs or payroll companies have developed reports that you can go in and print out already prepared reports for this loan application, which is very nice, very easy, because your quarterly reports is what they're asking for, your 940, your 941, or 944, which some of us don't even know what those reports look like. So if you're using any type of payroll software, QuickBooks, you can run payroll reports in there. You do have to have the 12-month history, and they run it on a monthly basis to average out. 1099s for independent contractors were part of the original documentation required. Some banks are still requiring that documentation. However, that 1099 employee, technically 1099 contractors' income is not added into your payroll costs. Originally it was, then it wasn't. So some banks are still requiring it just for documentation purposes to make sure you're not adding that into your total payroll costs. And then again, how you choose to calculate your full-time equivalent. So you can go from February 15th of 2019 to June 30th of 2019, or full-time equivalents from June 1st, 2020 to February 29th of 2020. You have to prove your legal business name. You can do that in a couple of different ways. Secretary of State site, you can pull proof there if you're registered with the state, and proof of your EIN number from the IRS, your tax returns, documentation for your health insurance premiums, documentation of your retirement plan contributions, and then some banks are also requiring your articles of organization, an operating agreement, your Dun and Bradstreet number, if you have one. These are not requirements. Some banks are just asking for it, and then income tax returns for the 2 most recent years. Some lenders might require additional than what is on here. What we did was we gathered the most common requests, and then definitely what the SBA was requiring for documentation of payroll. Again, contact your CPA. Many of these reports you won't have to pull on your own. They've developed these reports. I even know I did hear from one of my businesses that had applied early on that they used Paychex. Paychex had developed a report. They could just go in, print the report, or download the PDF and be able to send that right along to the bank, which made it very easy for them. So this is the most interesting part of the loan, and what really intrigues most people is the forgiveness piece of this. If you remember, the purpose of the loan is to keep people employed at the level that they were employed at prior to the crisis. So the loan is eligible for forgiveness. It's eligible for the first 8 weeks for expenditures during the first 8 weeks from the date of origination. And those are on expenses for payroll costs, your interest on the mortgage, rents, your utility costs, which they're listed there, additional wages paid to tipped employees, but at least 75% of the forgiven amount must have been used for payroll. Very important there. But if all of it is not forgiven, remember you're paying that portion back at 1% over a 2-year period, which 1% is an extremely attractive interest rate. So there are ways that this can not be forgiven if you're not using the funds for these purposes. They have to be used for one of these purposes, so you are going to have to document that. And there is additional information that will follow about the procedures of how to apply for forgiveness. Those have not been published at this time. So where can you apply? In talking to all of our local lenders, I got the same feedback. They were helping their customers first. So you want to go to whoever you have a relationship with. If you do not have a commercial lending relationship with a bank, you want to go to the bank where you have your depository relationship. Very important, because those are the people that are going to help first. Because of the demand, most banks are not, they're putting a wait list together. I have seen this where they're putting people on a wait list. Now, the state of Ohio did talk to Goldman Sachs. Because of this issue, there were many small businesses who just didn't have a banking relationship. Goldman Sachs was giving $20 million to the state of Ohio towards for this particular reason. You do have to visit the state of Ohio for information on that, and that's the coronavirus.ohio.org. There are third-party companies that are saying they can assist you with finding a lender. I would just encourage you to use caution. Again, you're put on a wait list. You want to stay in constant contact with them. Ask them, what lender are you using? What bank are you using? Where am I at? Am I sitting on a wait list? Because you could be sitting on a wait list and never get an application into the SBA because of the demand for this particular loan. So,
yeah, and I would add to that, don't pay any fees to those
no.
organizations. I've seen quite a few where they're offering that service to place you with a lender at the charge of a consultation fee. And the way it sounds to me, if the funding runs out, the last thing you want to do is be obligated to a consultation fee and not have any progress made on your application. Your bank, where you do your banking, is where you should start. That's what we've heard from multiple sources, and Julie just reinforced that.
Right. And if you don't have a commercial relationship with your bank, contact your branch that you do your regular depository business with. If you have trouble getting in touch with somebody, please reach out. I do know the majority of the commercial lenders covering the Salem market. If I can't get a hold of a branch manager, I'll get a name for you. Somewhere along the line, we'll get a name for you to get in contact with somebody. So please reach out to myself, the office number, or just emailing me. Again, we're happy to help connect you to an institution. And then just a couple highlights that aren't covered in there. The main part is the forgiveness. That's key to this. Being able to pay your employees 8 weeks of payroll and having that potentially forgiven is a huge benefit to our local small businesses, to any small business. But you have to maintain or quickly rehire those employees. You have to maintain the same salary levels. If you don't, the forgiveness is reduced if your headcount or the salary declines. So please keep that in mind. Again, 75% of the total loan amount has to be used towards payroll costs, and it can be reduced. 20 greater than 25% in wages paid to employees can be reduced. So I have the mention on there about the Goldman Sachs. And then here's where, if you're a business over 500 employees, you want to go to SBA, the SBA.org website and look up their size standards. Put in your NAICS code, and it will tell you what your size standard is and if you are considered a small business and could be eligible for this particular loan. And that's it as far as the slideshow there. But
There was a couple questions. Ben asked if we had anyone yet successfully get funded from the loan. I thought you said you had 2 people get funded.
Yeah, well, I have one that's funding today and one that will fund by Friday. They received all their promissory notes and everything, so they were signing those, returning those to the bank. But yes, we have had success, which is good. We have several others pending. Like I said, every institution has handled it a little differently. But they're all scrambling. They want to help their businesses.
And the forgiveness portion, again, just to make sure that part is understood, is you have to have 75% of the amount of the loan that you get used for payroll, and that loan is 2.5 times the average monthly payroll, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you take the 2.5 times the average monthly payroll. If that becomes your loan amount, 75% of that figure has to be used specifically for payroll in order for that to be forgiven.
That whole amount to be forgiven.
Correct.
If you use less than 75%, what can be forgiven will be reduced.
Ben asked if we knew which financial institutions had funded so far for the 2 that you're aware of.
I do. Farmers has 2 of the ones that are ready for funding.
Got it. I think that covers the majority. What we don't have is the application link. I wonder if you can share the application link in the comments in our Zoom meeting.
Yes.
And I will share that application link on Facebook Live so that other people have the link where they can go to apply. Now that'll just pull the application. You still have to go to a financial institution to submit that application. And that financial institution is responsible for the underwriting of the income and the approval of the loan. And it's my understanding that most of those are local banks that we've had the most success with, right?
That is correct. The application is on the SOD Center website. Links to all the SBA documents are on the SOD Center website. If you just visit sodcenter.com, go to the crisis page. There is a financial resource page on the crisis page that will direct you to the SBA application. So it is there, but I will also share a link directly to the application.
And a couple of final takeaways that I want to share again, and these are in the comments on Facebook Live as well, but primary points of contact are your bank, preferably the one where you actually have accounts, because they are going to prioritize you as their account holder over somebody who's just walking in with no prior relationship. And then your accountant who handles your taxes. If you don't have an accountant, now's the time to get one.
Yeah.
and that will be your person who will act as your resource to help with further details. The bank will be the party responsible for your getting the funding. The accountant will be the one to help you with calculation of the payroll that they're going to use to arrive at how much of a loan you can get.
And banks are relying on you, the business owner, to do your own calculation. They want proof of how you came up with that calculation, but they really are relying on you to pull all that information together and come up with those numbers.
Got it. In closing, one final thing I want to make sure that everybody's aware of first, that you can take penalty-free withdrawals from your 401k. Obviously, that to me is a last resort because you don't want to touch that retirement that you have set aside for the future. But if you find yourself in financial hardship and you do have a 401k, you are able to take that withdrawal without a penalty. Now, it will still be taxable, but there won't be that 10% penalty. That's also true of IRAs. And they do have some student loan debt relief options in the CARE Act that allows you to have payment suspensions of your student loans. So if you're in financial hardship, again, the deference of those student loan payments, I believe it's until September 30th for those. All of these things, again, are just in the interest of this payroll protection is specifically to keep people employed. And it's incentivizing employers to keep people employed by offering them this loan at a 1% interest rate or potentially 100% forgiven. Julie, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, this is not the only option available. There are many more. This one is just one we know the funding is going to run out, which we found it, and with the forgivable piece, we found it most important to share this one at this time. But the SBA does have some other funding resources, some other forgiveness as well. If you currently have an SBA loan, depends on the type of loan. There is a 6-month period that the SBA will make payments on that loan for you. So I would encourage you to take a look at our website for a lot of that information. Reach out if you have questions. We want to help as many businesses as we possibly can. We want to see everybody come out of this and be able to open their doors again. So please use this as a resource. We're here to help. And thank you to everyone for the ingenuity and creativity that our businesses have had to keep moving forward.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who've attended this know me in the capacity of a loan officer and a branch manager of a mortgage company. This particular interview was done under the capacity of Downtown Salem Partnership, which is our Building and Business Owners Association here in Salem, Ohio. And I'm the president of that organization. And Julie and I and all of the officers of our Building and Business Owners Association, we're in communication at least every couple of days, trying to make sure that our restaurants and our businesses in our downtown make it through this, and trying to make sure that we are offering funding and other things to make sure that they make it through this. If you've got recommendations for us on ways that we can help, if you own a business and need help, reach out to myself or Julie or any member of Downtown Salem Partnership or SOD, and we'll be happy to help. Julie, thanks very much for your time today.
Really appreciate it.
A great amount of knowledge. As I said, this will be recorded, and I'll share that recording with Julie, and I'm sure she'll have it on the website and SOD's Facebook page. Then we will get this put up on Downtown Salem Partnership's page as well, and I'll be sure to share it on my personal. Thanks everyone who joined. I hope you found this information valuable, and we will get through this together. We will make sure that we communicate with you any resources that we are made aware of as we go through this.